smoke the dizzy, but we can always share some dixies. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to rhyme. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, welcome guys, Miss Liz in the house, and I have my final two guests today in the house for September season 6. I have the incredible Ekta Garg in the back, and we're going to be talking fairy tales, nursery rhymes, and her incredible books today. So before we get started, we're going to get everybody over to Miss Liz's YouTube channel and Spotify channel. Give me a quick subscribe, follow, all that good stuff so you can check out all of these incredible tea times. If you're watching live and if you'd like to leave a comment, Miss Liz will put that in the disclaimer. In about 30 seconds, I'll be reading that to all of you guys. But before we get started, I want everyone to realize that all of these tea times do make a difference. They all impact the life in one way or another. Through conversations and through storytelling, we do make a difference. So if one tea time resonates with you, please share those tea times out. That's all Miss Liz asks from you. A quick share, a quick follow, a quick like, a quick comment. That's all we do on Tea Time with Miss Liz. So let's get the disclaimer on. Let's give you a good intro, and let's get my guest in here and let's spill some tea today. And today's tea is transforming every aspiration. That's the tea that we are serving today with Ekta. So the disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicated to sharing real-life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. Miss Liz is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All guests, viewers, and participants are responsible for using their own judgment when considering any action or decisions that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of the discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or visit Linktree at Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate and comment on or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. Miss Liz welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect those wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you are ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth, awareness, one cup at a time. Now let me give you a little bit on who's sitting in the back. Today at the Tea Time table, we welcome a storyteller who truly believes that every story holds the power to transform hearts. Our guest, Ekta R. Garg, is an award-winning author, editor, reviewer, and podcast host. She began her journey in publishing after earning her master's in magazine publishing from Northwestern University. Over the years, she has guided countless writers as an editor, reviewed books through her platform, The Right Edge, and created the podcast Biblo Breakdown to help readers and writers see the deeper layers of stories. Her own books, including the enchanting holiday novella, The Truth About Elves, and the collection The Witch's Enterprise, and other stories, showcase her love of weaving hope, grief, and magic into tales that resonate with readers of all ages. Please join me in giving a heartfelt welcome, Tea Time, to Ekta R. Garg, a true believer that words can heal, inspire, and spark change one story at a time. So let me get her in here and let's spill some tea together. Welcome, Ekta.
You, Liz. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you here. So I'm going to take you down some little rabbit holes or some fairy tales and all of those little trails that we're going to run down today. So who was Ekta as a little girl and who is Ekta now?
Ekta as a little girl is very similar to who she is now. Somebody who loves to read and who who would say that books are her first love, but don't tell my husband that. And who's always enjoyed words and stories and the power of language, the beauty of language, and somebody who is fiercely loyal to her family, her friends, and who maybe didn't understand this when she was little, but now knows that yes, words do have the power to transform hearts and lives and opinions even. We see that every day, for better or for worse. And, somebody who really is now committed to helping people with the skills and the experience and the expertise that she's built through the years.
Ekta, do you have your volume turned up really high? Because I'm getting like a high whine.
I can try to turn it down. Give me just a minute.
Let's give that a try.
Okay. I've turned it down.
There we go.
Okay, good.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
It sounded like a really high ringing bell. And
I'm so sorry. I hope that wasn't. I'm so sorry about that.
No, that's all good. I just wanted to get you so we don't have the whole show, right? Where the high ringing.
Yeah, no, of course. Absolutely.
So, Ekta, what got you into writing?
I've been reading for as long as I can remember. I mean, when I was in preschool, they would give us like these little storybooks that are like 3-4 pages long for, homework. And my mom tells stories of how I would get in the car and, in the 15-minute ride from school to home, I would finish the storybook and be like, okay, now what? Like, what else can I read? I have been surrounded by words my entire life. And I think it was just kind of inevitable that because I love stories so much that I would eventually want to start creating my own. So I started writing about the age of 8. It was when I was 14 that I knew that I wanted to be an author someday, but that didn't happen until many years later when The Truth About Elves came out in 2021.
Yeah, let's talk about that book, The Truth About Elves.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about that book.
Sure. So The Truth About Elves is about a man named Curtis who works part-time for Santa as an elf. Santa asks Curtis for a favor that he really doesn't want to do, but he kind of owes Santa one, so he does it. And it takes him back to the place that he thought he'd never see again, which is home. It's a holiday story for grown-ups. It's got a feel-good ending because I feel like holiday stories, absolutely should have a feel-good ending. But Curtis does have some serious challenges that he's been dealing with in his life that he has to continue to work through before he can finally make it back to home. So
is that your first book that you published?
It is, yeah. So it's not the first one that I wrote, but it's the first one that got published.
So what inspired you to write that book?
I was watching The Polar Express with my kids, many, many years ago. And it was one of those great movies that we've seen, I don't know how many times. And so, as it is when you're watching something that you've seen many, many times, my mind kind of started to wander a little bit. And I started thinking, what do the elves, what are they doing the rest of the year? I mean, we know about Santa on Christmas Eve going into Christmas Day, but what else are they possibly doing? And so I started sort of brainstorming that idea, playing with it a little bit. And then I was thinking about, well, what if on the night of Christmas Eve, when Santa is distributing all of these presents to every kid in the world, what if he has to have an elf who helps him? But what if this elf is afraid to fly? What would happen then? And so I started sort of building on that idea. And eventually that's, the brainstorming from that is what resulted in the book.
And you mentioned a lot about nursery rhymes and fairy tales and that. So which one stands out to you the most?
I didn't really tackle the whole subject of nursery rhymes and fairy tales head on until my newest book that just came out, The Witch's Apprentice and Other Stories. And in that one, I focus on the Jack and Jill nursery rhyme. The whole idea behind this book was that I wanted to take original fairy tales and nursery rhymes and sort of leave them as they were, but fill in the gaps of those stories. You know, we have so many amazing authors who fracture fairy tales, who do retellings. I mean, you know, like Wicked, for example, with the musical, the book, obviously, and then the musical and the movie. The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer is a great example. But I thought, you know, instead of kind of doing what everybody else has done, the authors who write in that space, I wanted to go back to the originals and explore them and say, well, we've got these stories that have these foundations and like these sort of structures. What if we go in and try to find the gaps in those structures and try to tell those stories? And so that's what I did in this book. And so it was a lot of fun. And I've been doing a couple of events now where I've been selling the book. I've been talking to people, the reviews that are slowly coming in, people seem to really like the concept. And so I'm hoping to do another collection. You know, and I'm telling people, if you read this book, if you love it, if you have a fairy tale or a nursery rhyme that you really have enjoyed, send it my way. And maybe I'll write a short story based on that.
Oh, I like that idea. You know, we need to start bringing those fairy tales and nursery rhymes right back to the table. You know,
I agree. I
we
agree.
grew up on them, right? And look
Yes,
at us.
absolutely. Absolutely.
It opens up the imagination, right, of the story itself. I like that you said this, the gaps in the structures, because we sometimes will read a fairy tale or a nursery rhyme and we're just like, well, why did Jack and Jill go up the hill? You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about Jack and Jill?
Well, I can tell you that I answered the question of why they went up the hill to fetch the pail of water. And you know, when I started working on this story, I spent a lot of time thinking about Jack and Jill and their relationship. What did I want for them? And because clearly the two of them are in this together. The original nursery rhyme is only 4 lines long, so we don't have any information on they are to each other. How are they connected? Are they related? I decided to make them brother and sister and sort of be stuck in a position where they have to go get this bucket of water. But, you know, in order to find out why they're stuck, why that's necessary, you will have to read the story. But it was really fun to sort of play with that idea and take these 4 little lines and you know, make it grow into a full-fledged story. And it's interesting because the people who have read the book for whatever reason, that is the one that sort of resonates with them the most. Like that's the one I'm hearing more feedback on. People are really enjoying it, which I'm so grateful for, but they're talking about that story more than they are some of the others. So it's really interesting to me to see people's reactions.
I'm going to pull up the book so you can describe the book, the colors, all of
Sure.
that good stuff. And for my audio listeners, just give them a little insight on the book as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this cover, I've had the same cover designer for all 3 of my books. And so when we started working on this cover, we wanted to put things on the cover that really speak directly to the stories that are included. And so, you know, we kind of went with this goldish kind of color. And of course, you know, The Witch's Apprentice and Other Stories is the title. But what I loved is in the word witch, we have the broomstick of a witch, which relates back to the title story, which is The Witch's Apprentice. In the word other, the O is actually a pail turned on its side to, again, sort of give a nod to Jack and Jill. And in the last word stories, the O there has been turned into a spinning wheel, which relates back to the last story in the book, The Beauty Before She Sleeps, which is a mashup of Sleeping Beauty and Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. And there's a fun little sort of curly Q ivy around the edges, which I absolutely love because I think it gives a nice little nod back to sort of those fairy tale times and that feel. And I absolutely love it. I mean, the incredible Kevin Stone has done all 3 of my covers. And I have never spoken to him like on the phone, but we've gotten to know each other through, you know, virtual communications. And I feel like every book cover that we've done together, we get to know each other a little bit better. And it's just been such a joy to see him bring my stories to life, you know, with this visual representation.
I just really like the colors, like the golden, yellow. And we talked about this yesterday with Dr. Brad about the yellow standing out and being the most visual color against any platform. I like the color because the golden color is like the golden tales, right? The fairy tales of, the old stories that we told our children and our grandchildren and so on, right? Uh,
Yeah, it was also kind of a nod to Goldilocks herself and the color of her hair, because I make a reference to that in that particular story. So that was another reason why we picked that color for the cover.
yeah, Goldilocks needs to come back because she was a mean woman. Like she kicked butt. She put up with Mama Bear, Papa Bear, and Baby Bear.
Yeah.
You mentioned Beauty Before She Sleeps. I like that
Yeah.
title. So you blended in three fairy tales together?
Two. I blended in two. And for that, the reason why I did that was because my question, so every story in this collection starts with a question, which is basically the question I was asking myself when I was starting to write the story. And so my question for the Beauty Before She Sleeps was, in the story of Sleeping Beauty, we're told that she was cursed by this evil fairy who said that when she pricks her finger on a spindle she will die, and then a good fairy comes in and says no, she manages to change the curse so that she won't die, she'll fall asleep. And then most versions of this fairy tale that I read, because I went back and I did read several, like I went back to children's books and I read several different ones to kind of get a sense of what the old original stories were. So most versions talk about how the king, after this curse was placed, ordered all of the spindles to be destroyed, right, in the
Oh,
kingdom, so that the young princess would never be susceptible. And yet she still somehow manages to prick her finger and go into this 100-year sleep. So my question for that portion of the story was, how on earth did that happen if the king, declared that all of these spindles be destroyed? What, with all of these security measures in place, she still fell under the spell of the curse. And so how was that possible? So there was that question, first of all, sort of lingering in my mind. And then the other question was about Goldilocks, because again, in most of the storybooks that I've read, the story actually starts with Goldilocks just kind of skipping through the forest. And she just happens upon this house, which of course is the house of the three bears. But most of those versions of the story never tell us where Goldilocks came from. We literally just start with her kind of, moving through the forest. There were a couple of versions where we actually do see Goldilocks at home with her mother, but it is very quick, just a couple of lines, and her mother's basically like, go outside to play. So we really don't know anything about Goldilocks. And so I was like, where did she come from? This, in some stories, she's a younger child. In some stories, she's a little bit of an older child, but she's still a child. So my question was, where did she come from? And how on earth did she feel like she, had permission to just basically walk into some random house, and, eat their food and sleep in their beds and all this? So taking those two questions, I put them together and I created the story, The Beauty Before She Sleeps.
I like the title. The title is nice. And there's a lot of times I read a book and I'm just like, how did that person get there? And how old were they? And those are the questions we need to start asking when we're reading stories, especially fairy tales, right?
Right.
Uh like
Right.
your first book, right? The Truth About Elves. Like, what do the elves do like during winter break or summer break? What do
Exactly.
they do? Do they go to school? Do they play? Do they build for another holiday?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I see a middle book behind you, and I can't see the
Yes.
title of that one, the purple one. Could you tell us a little bit about
Yes.
that one as well?
The title is In the Heart of the Linden Wood. It is my second book and my first full-length novel that was published. It is it's an original fairy tale for grown-ups, and it's about a grieving king who has to go on a quest to save his kingdom from a major threat. And while he's on that quest, he's going to have to rescue some hostages and mend another broken heart piece by piece, all while he's struggling with whether he's worthy of his crown and the memory of his late wife.
Wow. And I like the colors, the blending of the colors, like the blue, the purple, the gold. Those are really nice colors all blended together. So for all of my audio listeners out there, Eka has her 3 books behind her, and I strongly advise you to go check out the video and check out the covers of these books and check out these books as well. We had a couple of questions that came in, and I'd like to get them
Sure,
out to you, Eka.
sure.
We have one here. There we go. Kind of pushed a button, and I kind of just, and I was like, where did it go? uh, it says storytelling can be a bridge between cultures and communities. How do you approach writing with this in mind?
Wow, that's a really good question. You know, it's something that's actually been on my mind recently because my parents immigrated to the US from India way back in the 1970s. And so a few friends have suggested that the next story that I write really should kind of be rooted in the Indian culture. So it is something that's on my mind. You know, I do write about Indian characters and things, but I also don't want to write a story with certain characters or a certain culture just because we need to have culture in a story. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
it should be because that's what the story requires, or that, you know, those are the people who are in that place and time. I do believe that culture is very important in storytelling. I mean, all of us have a certain culture that we live in, whether it's your ethnic culture, whether it's the culture of your home or your town or your state, you know, whether it's the culture of your workplace, let's say, you know, there's some workplaces that have a very specific way that they do things, and that basically creates a culture of, you know, of that area and that profession. And so I do think that those things are important, and they may not necessarily be at the forefront of what you're writing, but they're always going to be there somewhere as part of the character and as part of that character's world. So it is something that I try to keep in mind.
And it kind of goes into the next question. How do you use your personal experiences to shape your characters and themes in your stories?
You know, for me, all 3 books started with questions, and those questions came because I'm just kind of a curious person. I have 2 degrees in journalism, and so I think just that training also sort of forces you to sort of think um, think in questions a lot, I should say. You're always asking questions of the world around you, of people, of situations, and so I think it's just about, for me, it was about wanting to answer questions. Like I said, for the truth about elves, it was, you know, what are the elves doing for the rest of the year? For my second book, my original fairy tale, In the Heart of the Linden Wood, the question was, what comes after happily ever after? You know, when you have a fairy tale that ends, typically it ends with, and they lived happily ever after. Well, what happens the next day? You know, and that's kind of what
They're
I
no
wanted to
longer
tackle.
happily ever after, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, what comes after that? And so I wanted to tackle that in that book. And then, like I said, in The Witch's Apprentice and other stories, every short story starts with the question that came to my mind. So for me, it really is about those questions that I'm curious about, that I want to answer. And the way I answer them is I write a story about it.
I like that. I like that approach. You got a question, write a story. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Thank you.
uh, Many authors talk about writing as therapy or self-discovery. What has writing revealed to you about yourself?
Wow, that's a really good question. Hmm, what has writing revealed to me about myself? I think that um, I can surprise myself, you
Hmm.
know, sometimes, and I think a lot of writers will identify with this, especially writers who sit down, who plot out a story ahead of time. There is still space for imagination and discovery. And there are times where my characters will say things or do things that completely catch me off guard. And I mean, it's true that most of what we write is somehow, in some way, shape, or form, rooted in what we do, what we believe, who we are, and it somehow is funneled through that. Sometimes, giving your characters the same values you have, sometimes by giving them the opposite, just so that you can continue to explore them. And so I think it's just a matter of just being surprised. I mean, I have the ability to surprise myself, which might sound like a strange thing to say, but we think if we don't know anything else, we at least know ourselves, and we know who we are and where we stand. But sometimes through the writing process, I end up, just through that spontaneous creation, things will come out that just kind of surprise me. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that that was kind of lurking back there in the back of my mind.
I think as writers, we surprise ourselves when we're writing, right? And then we write it down. And we're like, what, where did that come from? Like, who's in this room with me? Like,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
and I think that makes a book a good book, because we ourselves write on the paper, right? We put it to the ink to the paper, but we ourselves surprise ourselves, like you just said, like they went down that rabbit hole instead of that rabbit hole. Why did they go that way? Like, I like that. I like the fill in the gaps. I like that, because the questions, right? We have so
Yeah.
many questions in life that we're just like, what are the answers? And I like that question. What happens after? And happily ever after. Do they stay happily ever after? I like that question. We should be asking fairy tales that in Disney more. What
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah, well, I guess Disney being, at least the animation, the studio side of it, they're there to make a movie and to entertain kids and be done with it. But that's one of the coolest things about writing in any artistic form, is that you can take, the existing art and sort of challenge it or question it or extend it in some way, shape, or form, which is another reason why fractured fairy tales and retellings are so popular, because we have these fairy tales that we've been telling for generations, sometimes centuries, and people still want to explore them, and so they do so in all sorts of different ways, which is really fun.
And Eka, can you share a moment when you had feedback from a reader completely shifted your perspective on your own work?
Oh, hmm. I don't know that any readers have, at least not yet, shifted my own perspective of my own work. They have, however, responded in ways that reassure me that what I'm trying to do is making an impact in the way that I want it to. I tell people that I write stories about grief and magic and hope, and how those three things intersect and affect characters' lives. And I've gotten feedback from people, whether through reviews, whether face to face, whether through email, or even on social media, that people are seeing those things and they're responding to those things. Because for me, writing, it's so true. Like, it does reveal things about yourself to yourself, to the writer, but it's also our way of working out the things that are challenging us, or bothering us, or frightening us, or exciting us. And when you do the job right, then readers will feel that. And to know that readers are feeling that and experiencing that the way that I intended, to help them just as much as writing helps me to turn around and try to help them. It's incredibly humbling and gratifying, and also exciting, because it means that my words matter to people, to more than just my computer screen. And so that I mean, I can't even tell you how much that means to me. I'm sure, however, at some point, when I continue to write, that at some point somebody will say something that will make me stop and think twice about what I'm writing. And I'm okay with that. I'm open to that. It's writing, like any other art, is a conversation, among other things, between two people's emotions and experiences. And so I'm definitely open to that conversation.
We have a part two to that first question that I just asked you. Have
Sure.
readers' reactions ever surprised you? Inter, 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 interpreting books differently than you've expected. I think it's kind of
I think
similar, but
it's interpreting, yeah.
yeah. My tongue doesn't twist that way. Some words I'm just like, yeah.
No, it's fine. It's surprised me how some people have reacted more strongly to certain things in books than I might. Like I said, for The Witch's Apprentice and Other Stories, my new book that just came out, a lot of people have been talking about the Jack and Jill story, whereas I thought that they might be reacting to a different story in there. But a lot of them have been talking about that. My older daughter, actually, in my second book, In the Heart of the Linden Wood, there's a little character who pops up for literally half a scene. I mean, and he's a little boy of probably about 10, and he's just, he's there and he's interacting with one of the main characters, and then he leaves the scene and then we don't see him again. For some strange reason, she just loves this little character, and I cannot for the life of me figure out why. And I've had other people, readers, reviewers, react to the characters in that book, again, very strongly and in positive ways, and, being excited. And I'm like, I didn't think that person would really land, so much with somebody, but I'm glad that they did. So it's interesting to see those reactions.
Well, it's always nice, when you hear the feedback from a reader and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, especially from your child as well, right? When they read your books and then they're like, Mom.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's also interesting too, because I think it just goes to show that books, when a writer is writing before, they get published, they're really writing for themselves. Once the book is published, then it really belongs to the writer, but also to everybody else. And so it's fun and interesting to see how different people react to the elements of the book, whether it's the characters or the plot or the story or the conflict, or dialogue or what have you, because it belongs to all of us, and so we all have a personal stake in it, and it's a lot of fun to see how people express that.
I like that you said, once it's published, it's no longer just our story, right? It's everyone out there who's reading it.
Yeah.
And that's why when we publish, then I think we get that little fear, right? Just before it goes live, we're just like, oh, do we do it? Is it good enough? Is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah. How long does it take you to write a book, Eka?
Each of the books that have been published have taken different lengths of time. I hate to say it depends, but it really just does depend on a variety of factors. It depends on how much plotting I might have done beforehand. It depends on whether I'm struggling with certain elements of the story. It could even depend on what's going on in my personal life. Like last year, I lost my dad, which was, kind of hard because my parents and my sister and I have always been very, very close. I kind of describe us as a very sturdy square. So, I was working on a project at that time, a story that was very dark and very sad. And so I actually ultimately had to put that down and just stop writing for a good 2.5, 3 months, just stop completely, and gave myself that grace of that time to just take a break. And I knew I would get back to writing. I wasn't sure if I would go back to that story. So it could be a variety of factors that, affect how long a book takes. I mean, that particular story, I'm not working on it anymore, but I turned around and I started working on stories for The Witch's Apprentice and Other Stories. And that was the book that ultimately came out this year. And I don't know if I'll go back to that other story or when I'll go back to it. So it really just kind of depends on the project and what's going on at the time. Yeah.
So has writing helped you through your grief?
It has. It gives me a place to sort of express sometimes what I can't express when I'm talking to someone. And it's kind of funny because just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to somebody about this. They were asking, like, what does it feel like when you write? And I say, I said that it's when I sit down to write, that's when I feel like everything falls perfectly into place. I can truly express myself with the most clarity and in the best way possible, which I may not be able to do when I'm talking to someone, especially when it's something that's upsetting. Sometimes the words just kind of fall all over the place. But when I'm writing, it really helps me put down what I need to put down in words and then go back and work through that, whether it's through revisions, whether it's adding to it, even if it's just to go back and reread it. Maybe I don't do anything with it later, but just to go back and reread it. And, there's something very affirming about that in seeing those words on the page and knowing that that is the totality of that experience at that time. It definitely it's helped me for sure.
And is there a book that you've written that you'd like to see made into a screen or a movie?
I would love it if The Truth About Elves was made into a movie. It's part of it takes place at the Arctic Circle, and there's one scene in particular in there that's during the Northern Lights, where Curtis, the main character, he's sitting and he's looking out the window, and it's nighttime, and the Northern Lights are kind of playing in the window, and it's a powerful scene because he's thinking about running away yet again from certain problems. And I just, little things like that, I think it would make a great movie. And also because, we love the Christmas movies that make us feel good at the end, or, kind of reassure us that no matter what hardships we go through, we can work through them, especially with the power of friends and family who care so deeply for us. And so I would love for it to be made into a movie. That would be fantastic.
You just never know who's listening to Tea Time. That's why that question's there.
Yeah. Hey, Netflix, if you need a project, give me a call.
It amazes me sometimes who's tuning in. So, if you could have tea with any character in your books, who would you have tea with?
Oh, wow. I love that question. Would love to sit down with Geraldine in my second book, In the Heart of the Linden Wood. She is a healer and a midwife, and she goes through a terrible time very early on in the book, which then becomes even worse. She actually loses her license to practice. And because in the very first chapter of the book, and this is not a spoiler, it just basically is what kicks things off, but the king loses his wife and his child due to childbirth, a childbirth that goes very badly. And Geraldine is the head midwife who was there trying to help the queen deliver this baby. And the king is so racked with guilt that he basically strips her of all her privileges, does not pay her for the services rendered in all the time that she's taking care of the queen. And she's kind of stuck in this really hard place about, what do I do? How do I support my family? And so I would love to sit down and have tea with her at some point and just talk to her about that experience. It was really interesting writing through it because I am not a midwife. I've never had that experience. I have had 2 children of my own, so I do know what that looks like or what that feels like, but I've never had to be on the delivering end of babies. So it was really interesting to write through that. And I would love to sit down with her and just talk more through her experiences, and maybe even sit down with her later on in the book when things maybe start to go a little bit right. You'd have to read it to find out. And just kind of see where she's at.
I love that answer, because sometimes we write these stories and then we're just like, well, who do I pick out of all of my characters to sit and have tea with? And that's how I throw in the tea. But now I'm going to throw in your tea that you gave me, and your tea was transforming every aspiration. Why'd you give me that tea?
I have a lot of aspirations personally to help people in the writing community. And so I want to, as much as within my scope of my personal commitment and my commitment of my time and my energy and what I want to transform every aspiration that I have into goals that are realized and achieved. And hopefully by doing so, I can help other writers transform every aspiration they have of seeing their publishing dreams come true. I think storytelling is never going to go away. Technology has changed books dramatically, but storytelling is never going to go away. We are people, humans are storytelling creatures. We crave stories both to listen and to tell. And that will always be, as long as the human race is in existence, that's always going to be with us. And there is something very powerful to me in telling stories and also helping others tell their stories. And so that's why I said I would like to transform every aspiration of my own in trying to make the world a better place through my own stories and helping other writers do the same.
I love that tea. I love it. Thank you for sharing that tea with us today. I did a little bit of research on your website and I found Heart of a Child. Is that a new book that's coming?
No, that's actually, it was an anthology that I was a part
Okay.
of several years ago. There was a writing community on Facebook, and I was so privileged to be a part of that for a few years. And so we produced a couple of anthologies. So I was in that one. The writing community, unfortunately, is no longer in existence. I think it was another casualty of COVID, like so many things were, as well as, the head of the community, she had some other responsibilities that she needed to pay attention to. And so unfortunately it did fold, but it was fun to be a part of it while I was, and, to be able to have stories put out in those ways.
See, I go down rabbit holes. I find stuff, and then I'm just like, I don't know. Is it a new book? Is it not an old book? So check that book out as well, The Heart of a Child, and check out the. Like if anybody wanted to reach out to you, I'm going to get it out a little early, and I'm going to get it out at the end of the show again. But if anybody wanted to find you, where could they find you?
Stop by my author website. I have a contact form on there. My email is also on there. So my author website is just my name, Ekta R Garg. So that's EKTARGARG, ektargarg.com. And so you can find me there. And I use the same thing for my Instagram handle. So you can go on Instagram and find me there. I do hang out on what was formerly Twitter, which is now X. But I only interact with writers and people in the publishing industry there. I don't really talk to anybody about anything else over there. So same handle for X, and then on Facebook. So just reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
I like to switch it up, guys, for all my listeners out there. Sometimes it doesn't need to be at the end. Sometimes you got to listen to the show, right? You got to listen to Tea Time to get that good information.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
I also found something called Author's Tales. What is an author's tale?
That was the name of the writing community on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
See, got to ask a question to get an answer.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Eka, I asked you your favorite color, and you said all shades of purple. I like
Yes.
that answer because you didn't just say purple; you said all shades. So, what is it about all shades of purple?
Somebody said to me a very, very, very long time ago that the color purple was what was used for the color of royalty way back, like a couple thousand years ago. And I think it had something to do with the way that fabric was dyed, that the dye that would produce the color purple was very, very expensive. And so it was only the royalty way back, 5 bazillion years ago that could afford it. And something about that just really stuck with me when I was little. And, I, like so many little girls, had aspirations to be a princess of some sort. And so I was like, well, princesses are royal and royals wear purple. And so it just sort of stuck with me. And then, when I went to Northwestern, of course, their colors are purple and white. And so that, and I had such a wonderful, wonderful time in my 15 months there. It was definitely a life-changing experience. And so just something about those colors now just resonate with me. And, once in a while, I'm like, I wonder if I should, sort of start picking a different favorite color, which sounds like a silly thing. But I always sort of somehow gravitate back towards any shade of purple, from the lightest all the way to the darkest.
Well, purple's nice, and it's in the middle of the middle book. So
Yeah.
you got purple, right? So
Yeah.
and colors do resonate with us, and there is a story behind the color too. So it all goes back to storytelling, right? If we don't tell the
Absolutely.
story, how do we get to know anybody? So, and I asked you to give me one word to describe yourself. You gave me the word earnest. Earnest.
Yeah, I think I would definitely say I'm very earnest in the things that I do. I may not necessarily succeed in everything I try, but I do put in my 100% to succeed and to accomplish my goals. So I do think that I am very earnest. So yeah.
And then you gave me stories for fairy tale lovers. Tell me a little bit about that. Stories for fairy tale lovers.
Yeah, I mean, I really think I did not set out to write in the fairy tale space, but I think I'm just enjoying it so much that more and more, I really think that that's where my career is slowly migrating to. So I think the stories that I write are for people who love fairy tales, especially, for grown-up readers who, when you were a kid, and if you loved something like, say, The Chronicles of Narnia or Bridge to Terabithia, The Secret Garden, these books that either had magic in them or gave us feelings of magic and wonderment. And that's kind of what I aim for in my stories, is to remind adults of that feeling and of that love for those stories, while also giving them stories that deal with the hard things, like in The Heart of the Linden Wood. The king of this kingdom loses his queen in the very first chapter. He thought he had his happily ever after, and now she's gone. And when you lose someone who you love so dearly, who you depend on so much, that's a very, very hard thing. And yet, he goes on a quest, like so many fairy tales do. And so I was trying to balance both the fairy tale sort of feel as well as the actual practical, sometimes terrible things that we go through as adults. And as that's why I say that I think my stories definitely would appeal to people who love fairy tales.
And we just had a question that came in. It says fairy tales are often thought of children's stories. Why do you believe they can remain so powerful and re, reventful for adult readers today? My tongue today, I'm telling you.
No, it's funny. I think that fairy tales, the reason why they're still so popular today, is because they're very universal. One thing that all good writing does is that it offers themes and ideas that are universal to the reader, no matter where you come from, no matter what experience you have. For example, if you look at the story of Cinderella, more than anything, Cinderella just wanted to be loved. She wanted her family to love her. She had a father who dies, obviously, and she's left with this stepmother and stepsisters, and she really just wanted them to love her. And her yearning for going to the ball. Again, if you go back and read the original, there really isn't much about her saying, "Oh, I wish a prince would come and sweep me off my feet." She really just wanted to belong, and I think that's something that everybody can relate to. No matter if you are the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or if you are living by yourself and you just, have a regular 9 to 5 job, we have all been in a situation where we have wanted to belong to something. And because, fairy tales have these really universal themes, I think that's why they're still relevant today to both children and adults. Kids will feel that sense of wanting to belong in a different way than adults will, but everybody has that experience. And if you go back and read the original fairy tales, some of them are actually quite dark. When we think fairy tales, we think of mostly the Disney versions that are kind of, a lot of song and dance and like, cute little birds and mice and that sort of thing. But the originals were actually very, very dark. And so you could say that they started out as stories for adults, and through the years, even before Disney got to them, through the years, based on the research that I did, were sort of made a little bit more palatable for younger readers. And then eventually, when the Walt Disney Studios took them over. So I think that they absolutely will appeal to readers, again, till the end of time, because they are so universal in their themes.
Yeah, because the original stories were really dark. I listened to somebody on TikTok who was telling the nursery rhymes and the dark sides of them, like Mockingbird, like the rock, Rockabye Baby and all of that. And I was just like, oh, that's a little dark there. And we sing these nursery rhymes and read them to our children and our grandchildren, and then we're like, ooh, I don't know, like, do we still want a Rockabye Baby like in the treetop?
Well, and I mean, it's funny because I think, with time, and we were talking about culture earlier. When cultures change, when storytelling changes, when stories are transformed through the ages, I don't think there's anything wrong with telling those tales, those nursery rhymes or those fairy tales, because they do change. And so their meaning changes and how we interpret them changes. So it's a really interesting sort of exploration of stories overall. But yeah, if you go back and do research like The Ring Around the Rosie, I mean, that's actually about the Black Plague, and all the things that used to have to happen that people at that time thought would protect them from the Black Plague. And so they can be really, really dark.
I'm glad that you put a little bit of light into them, because nursery rhymes and fairy tales are for all ages. It's not just children. From to 92. Like, my grandma was reading nursery rhymes when she was in her 90s, like, so there's no age limit for that. uh we have a question here. Looking at your entire body of work, what thread do you feel ties all your books together?
I do think it is just the examination of how grief and magic and hope all come together and transform people. And that's something that I am very intentional about and have become even more intentional about now that the third book has come out and that I'm actively brainstorming ideas for the fourth. I didn't really start out um, wanting to write about those things or even knowing that I was writing about those things. But the more I work and the more I write, I realize that those are things that I really do want to focus on and highlight to help others work through their grief by giving them some hope and throwing some magic in there just because it's fun. And it can be a little bit of a distraction, when you're carrying a heavy load of a heavy heart. Sometimes having a little bit of a distraction, even if it's just for a few minutes, can make a world of difference to someone.
And Neka, did I catch you right? You said you're working on a new book?
I'm brainstorming ideas for a new book. I have 2 or 3 ideas that I've been playing with, and I have not settled on which one yet, because all of them sound really great, and all of them have challenges, and I'm a little bit nervous about starting something new. And also, I've just been so fortunate in having a lot of opportunities, like talking to you today about The Witch's Apprentice and other stories, that I have been a little bit short on time in order to sit down and really work. So it's a little bit of a practical thing as well as a little bit of an emotional thing. So yeah, I'm pondering the next one. I can't say that I'm actively working on it yet.
So you're pondering. So we're getting ready for a good book.
I hope so. I hope so.
We have a question that came in. If you could co-write a book with any author, past or present, who would it be?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Um, There are a couple of authors who I really admire, who I think I could just learn from. Frederick Backman is one. His prose is just unbelievable. I think it would be so much fun to co-write with him, only because I feel like I could learn so much from him as an author, and it would just be such a privilege to just share space with him, whether that's virtually on the page or actually sitting next to him. I adored Erin Morgenstern's book, The Night Circus. I think it would be so much fun, again, because I feel like I could learn so much from her as a writer and how she approaches things. So I think, either one of them, it would be my privilege and my honor to work with either of them.
Night Circus. I've For some reason I've seen that book or I've heard of that book before.
Oh, it's a beautiful story, Liz. It's actually what inspired me to write In the Heart of the Linden Wood, because a friend of mine sent it to me many years ago as a birthday gift. And I had actually heard about it on NPR one morning when I was driving my kids to school. And I happened to hear, a little bit of an interview, not an interview, sorry, a review that the NPR reporter at the time was doing. And it sounded like a really cool story. But my kids were much, much younger then. And so, my thoughts were just kind of here or there and everywhere. So I kind of forgot about it until my friend sent it to me for my birthday a couple of years later. And I read it and I fell absolutely in love. I mean, what Erin Morgenstern manages to do in this book, she's got basically 4 main plot lines that are all connected to this circus that only happens at night. And I mean, it's magical and it's beautiful and there's romance and there's, the one of the plot lines is set in the past and another one is set in the future. And then, one is set in the present. And it's incredible the way that all of these little stories, these individual stories sort of are woven together about this night circus and all of the adventures that people have when they go there.
So kind of like a time travel.
Kind of. I would have to go back and read it again to see if time travel really is one of the elements, because that was a question that I sort of had at one point in reading it. I'm like,
I'm big on time travel. Like,
oh, me too. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So am I. Oh my goodness. I love a good time travel. Last year I read The Ministry of Time. And it was set in a future where time travel is just kind of like a normal everyday thing. Fabulous book. Fabulous, fabulous book. It was so good.
and what was the name of that one?
called The Ministry of Time. And it's basically, the premise is that there are some scientists or researchers, I guess you could call them, who go back to different time periods and bring back historical figures to the present day to just study them and hang out with them and sort of, it's a really interesting, zany, fun, cool concept. It was just so much fun to read.
Okay, now I got a question for you. You like time travel?
I do.
Do you believe that fairy tales are time travel?
I mean, I guess I do, in the sense that, in our imaginations, they can take us back to a different time and place. Whether time travel is actually possible, you'd have to ask a physicist about that one. I don't know if it actually is, but my younger daughter could probably answer that. My younger daughter, she wants to be an engineer, and she loves physics. I mean, adores the subject. I do not understand physics at all. So I don't know if it's actually possible, but I do think that stories, just in and of themselves, do have the qualities of time travel that we want time travel to have. They take us to different places and different eras, and they let us live through other people's experiences, and sometimes change our perspective and our viewpoints on those experiences.
Well, the reason I asked that question, Eka, is because you know how Disney does the remakes of Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast, and so they're kind of bringing it into the present moment of where she was in the past, the present, and then the future, right?
Yeah.
So I always wondered, is that their way of telling us about time travel?
I do think that they're probably trying to sort of recalibrate their stories for different generations. I know that when the live action of Aladdin came out, one criticism that some people had of the animated version, which I absolutely loved, but then, I was a teenager when it came out, and I didn't really think too deeply about these things. I just thought, hey, it's a new Disney movie. I went, I watched it, I loved it. It was done. But a lot of people had complaints about Jasmine as a character and said that she really didn't have a lot of agency. She was just kind of there, and Aladdin did all of the important things that made the movie, the story, go forward. And so in the remake, they gave Jasmine more agency. They gave her more to do, more essential to the plot. And so I think Disney is trying to, in some ways, go back and course correct a little bit for those things, where maybe men and women in particular have not been depicted as equals, where, of course they can be. Just because a woman is a woman doesn't mean that she can't be an agency for change. But unfortunately, a few generations ago, it wasn't that long ago, people didn't believe that. And so I think in some ways it's good that Disney is doing that they're giving women their due. I'm not a big fan of all of the live action remakes, but that's more of a personal choice.
I kind of prefer the cartoon. I watched Lilo and Stitch the other night, and I was like, I prefer the cartoon.
Yeah. I mean, my kids absolutely adored Lilo and Stitch when it came out, and they refused to watch the live action because there it was a storytelling choice. Like, they said that they didn't like how some of the story was changed, not for giving anybody agency or anything, just to change the story. And they just loved the original so much. They're like, we just can't think of the characters doing anything different than what they did in the original.
Yeah, it threw me right off. I was just like, no, that gets like a one for me. I was really disappointed. Everybody was like, you got to check it out. I checked it out, and I was like, no, not my cup of tea at all.
Yeah.
So, Eka, what message or legacy do you hope readers carry forward after experiencing your stories?
I hope that they are reassured that when they go through the hard things, they're not the only ones going through them, and that there are other people going through them. And subsequently, that means that there are people for them to lean on, even if, in the case of my books, they're fictional characters. I have had people come to me and tell me that after reading my books, they felt a little bit better about their own grief, the difficult things that they were going through. And really, that's all I want, is that people read my books and that they finish them feeling a little bit better about what challenges they might be experiencing. And that, they might end the stories feeling happy and with a smile.
Well, thank you so much for sitting and having tea with me today. I'm just going to do a closing summary. And if anybody would like to know how to reach Eka, you need to listen to Tea Time. That's the way we're going to do it today. But Eka, we'll give somebody a little break. So how can people reach you before we wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out to me on my author website. That address is ektargarg.com, ektargarg.com. And you can find me on Instagram, on X, and on Facebook.
Well, thank you so much. Uh, what a beautiful tea time we shared today with Ekta R. Garg. Through her stories and her journey, she reminded us that storytelling isn't just about ink on a page. It's about the heartbeats behind the words, the experiences that shape us, and the hope we pass forward. Ekta's passion for guiding other writers, her commitment to uplifting literature and own magical tales have shown us that stories can bridge the gaps between people and spark their new beginnings. As we close this cup of tea time, let's carry with us her wisdom. Every story we tell has the power to heal and to bring light to someone else's journey. Thank you, Eka, for joining us and for inspiring us to keep turning pages in books and in life. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such a privilege, and I'm so, so glad that I could talk to you today.